poisoning of the food supply is something that is, I can't emphasize the urgency of that enough. And we all know that the poisoning of the food supply is both happening and is getting worse. It's not something that's going to get any better. The idea that Monsanto is creating a artificial or a genetically modified salmon is in itself kind of an abomination. And these things aren't viewed as an injustice against nature. But this is all within the umbrella of human nature against natural nature. Human nature is to a cube as a natural human is to a tree. And so human nature is to a cube as a natural human is to a tree. Human nature is something that is both rigid and it is defined by the history that created that idea, Plato, the creation of different edifices or buildings, structures to define or go away from nature. And this has been the tendency of human beings for thousands of years since the discovery of different kinds of technology, the use of flame or the use of agriculture to artificially create an environment that is not natural, and the going against nature, that act in itself is that human nature. And the result is also a human environment. And what has happened is that evolution of human nature has gone to such an extent that the natural human practically doesn't exist. It does in forms and it does in shades, but one of the greatest characteristics of human nature so far to come out of the 21st century through the Industrial Revolution is the production of absolutely unnecessary things like makeup or the use of propaganda to make people feel inadequate as they are naturally, and to seek out products and just things that they have to then spend money on or buy to feel like they are, say, like a movie star or a model, or so that they can feel better about themselves. When in actuality, the only thing that's going to make them feel better about themselves and that's going to make them feel happy or content or really just at peace, which is what they're seeking ultimately in that state, is to have love and community, which is something that natural humanity is inclined to do without, and it's gravitated towards that state of community and cooperation, and instead of wholeheartedly competition. The idea of evolution, that evolution came about because of a competitive, so the stronger will survive, is in itself a deception of the nature of nature itself, which is it's not competing to survive. The weakest are the ones that are weeded out. The strongest are the ones that dominate. There is no domination in nature. There's only survival. It's not necessarily survival of the fittest. It's that the weakest die off. The fittest ones get away from the lion or the tiger. The weakest ones end up getting weeded out. It has nothing to do with whether or not one or the other is fitter than the other. It has to do with one or the other being able to get away from the tiger, and the one that's the weakest is of course going to be consumed. It's just a natural fact. So what we've done is we've taken the idea that nature is against us, and we used it in a way to try and dominate absolutely nature itself. And in doing so, we've destroyed the environment, we've consumed massive amounts of resources, we've taken the gem that is this planet, the spaceship Earth, and we've turned it into a trash dump. What is the difference between wealth and freedom versus money and slavery. The difference between money and slavery versus wealth and freedom. Like, wealth is an actual thing that you can say exists, because wealth is just the resources. Wealth is just, the planet Earth is an infinite abundance of wealth, potentially. And what we have tried to turn it into is the same thing as turning nature into a cube. We've tried to turn wealth into a piece of paper, a slip of paper that you can give to someone, and they will be able to, take that as an equal offering of what they're going to give you as an object. And this is a deception as well. It's just more of the idea of the perfect world through artificial means ultimately leads us to the destruction of one thing and the reincorporation of it into another. Destroy it and turn it into a plastic Jesus. Destroy nature and turn it into a dollar bill or a teddy bear or a shoe. And so the use of self-image and the use of propaganda to make you believe that in order to be a contributing member, there's the idea that you have to spend money. After 9/11, President Bush's main speech that he gave, the first speech that he gave, at a certain point he was saying, go back into the malls and consume. That's what you're going to do. That's to keep this country alive. You have to go out and buy. You have to buy things. That's what he was saying, basically, that was the ultimate objective for us to do. How is that going to solve the economic hardships or the problems of terrorism, or we get into this idea, or through propaganda, that in order for me to be happy, in order for me to feel like 9/11 or terrorism doesn't exist, I have to eat comfort food and watch TV all day. Like, that's the only way that you're going to get over this. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing that's done with self-image. People have a self-image about them, and it's based on what they see primarily on television and what they know primarily from other people that have bought these products. They say, "Oh, I've never felt better because I have this face cream now," and it's like, how do you feel happy from that? How can you legitimately tell me that you feel happy simply because of the fact that you bought this product? And what that is the attempt to replace the flame that's in each and every one of us. The flame that is where love is resting by the warmth of this flame, the inner spiritual flame. And what we've tried to do through human nature is to replace that flame with the industrial fire, replacing the flame with a torch, some kind of miniaturized representation. We try to replace the fire that's in our hearts with a torch that comes from the outside, from somewhere else. And by using that torch, it ends up being something that it's not enough. And so we have to get more. We have to fuel that fire more and more with more and more products. And you can't derive self-esteem from buying things. You can't get happiness from buying things. You can get titillation and very brief satisfaction or a kind of entertainment or a very superficial kind of things that only last very briefly, which is why it's addicting to buy things. It's addicting. Then you have to, so the incentive then to buy things, just to be able to buy things, I have to work a job to buy things, not to live, not to survive, not to thrive off of the world, but just to feed the addiction of consuming. And so in this way, the economy, or the whole premise to our society, has led people to the consumerism that exists. Mall culture, in which the mall is kind of the church. The ritual is to consume things and then to use them let's say, video games or the television. The television itself would be like the preacher, the religious figure that is disseminating the zeitgeist, the worldview, and the dollar is like the cross. It's like the symbol that we carry with us. And when we share that symbol with other people, they're willing to share their products with us. And it's this whole religious kind of cult of consumerism. And that has, in itself, the self-denial principle. The denial of yourself for the creation of something that you believe is more perfect. Like a woman that goes and sees on television these women with large breasts, and she believes that in order to be beautiful, she has to have large breasts. So she goes and she gets a surgery to get breast enlargement. And so she feels that she's more beautiful then because she has larger breasts, but in actuality, you aren't any more beautiful inside. You aren't any more happy. They'll be happy for a little while, and they feel like maybe they should go bigger, or maybe they should get a facelift, or maybe they should have all these other things. There's all these other things that are wrong with them. So it's something that just continuously snowballs and builds up, as long as you indulge in it. This is all leading up to why are people so depressed on it. There's so many people in our country, in our world, of Western culture primarily, that are like utterly depressed, and then there ends up being, of course, the pharmaceutical industry to then facilitate that feeling. But couldn't there just be a legitimacy to depression? Couldn't it be that people are legitimately depressed because the world that they live in is depressing? There is a war against nature, which in and of itself is complete insanity. Complete insanity. The denial that we are nature in the first place, the denial of our naturalness, and the attempt to thwart nature, which in itself is something that is completely loving. It can't not love. It is a creative force. It is something that is always going to be developing and bringing things into new harmonies, which is why a lot of people, when they hear things like these, or they hear bad news about the way that the world is going, they're almost glad, because it will mean the elimination of the human species. And they believe that the human species in itself is a cancer innately. But this view is only a result of the human nature. It's not a result of natural humanity. Natural humanity would not have these kinds of situations going on in the first place. Human nature is what's causing the nihilism of humanity against humanity. And when we come to realize that, it means that if we can inherit our natural humanity and then go into the next stage, which is to actually act as natural humans, then we would actually be able to really thwart the real problem. People that believe that humanity itself is the problem aren't seeing the real causes of these problems. They're only seeing the effects. And we as a destructive force is a symptom of the cause. The cause is things like the Federal Reserve, things like capitalism and corporatism, and the corruption of government through special interest groups, through the interests of the Bank of London, the international globalist agenda. These things are what is causing the human nature to be as rampant and destructive as it is. When you believe that you and I in this room, are the destructive force, you are giving in to the suggestion that human nature puts out there in the first place, which is that we must be controlled. And the reason that perspective is out there is because it comes from the aristocratic class. It comes from the aristocrats in the first place. So of course they want you to give up your freedom. Of course they want you to limit your desire for humanity to progress. Because if you believe that our progression is something that's going to destroy the planet, then you can be controlled. You're more easily controllable, and you're less likely to help others and to care about your fellow human being, which is also what they want. Because if we don't care about the homeless, then we can have millions of homeless people. And then ultimately, we can dissolve the conditions that created the civilization in the first place, and then replace it with essentially neo-feudalism. Neo-feudalism is the ultimate goal. And so the neo-feudalism will come into existence as a world government. A world government will be created in the future from our denial, or our self-denial will create the conditions necessary for world government. And that will be, we are all going to be enslaved under a global tyranny that will be complete. It will be 100. There won't be a place for you to run. That's what people don't understand, is that when this world government comes into existence, and it's coming into existence, there's no denying that it's coming into existence. There have been a plethora of quotes from the globalists themselves saying, you won't be able to, we're going to have world government whether you like it or not. And it's just a matter of when. And, you know, not everybody's going to like the world government, but, you know, poo-poo on them. It doesn't matter if they don't like it or not. It doesn't matter whether it's something that everybody is going to be happy about. It's going to happen. It's happening. It is, if anything, it's already happened. But it's just a matter of setting all of the gears into motion and creating the conditions. First, America has to be destroyed. America, as an empire, as a civilization, has to fall in order for the globalists in order for globalism to take place, because it's too dominant of a force. It has to be taken out and then reconfigured, turned into essentially a tyranny, and then once that's happened, bringing Canada and Mexico together into a kind of United Nations, it will be the North American Union. These are all things that have already been drafted into place. The North American Union already has its own currency. It's called the Amera. This already exists, but it's not. The gears have not been set into motion yet. NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. This is the first step of creating the North American Union, and this is all being set into motion before America has even fallen, because it's planned. This has all been planned in advance. And so the world government will come into place. You won't be able to be free anywhere. You will not be able to escape it. That is the truly most terrifying aspect about this, is that you will not be able to escape the new world order. You will be forced into the system, and there will be no way for you to escape. And so, from the planetary, from world government, we can experience something in the future. Instead, we can replace the idea of a world government with something more like a planetary organism, or planetary sovereignty. Planetary sovereignty. Sovereignty is something that we believe is as an idea. We believe that sovereignty is something where this country has sole authority over its laws and drafting its rules and creating its own justice, basically. And when a country has its own sovereignty, the idea is that if some other country is controlling its laws or the drafting of its bills or its justice system, that society is being controlled. Once it's being controlled by another, it's lost its sovereignty. So sovereignty can be lost. It cannot be shared, but the only way that it can be shared is if there's a country, well, not shared, but the only way that a country can have another controlling it and not be taking away its sovereignty is if it's helping with making roads, let's say. You know, helping with some kind of infrastructural achievement, rather than it being like, we're going to tell you how you're going to, like let's say if we were to go into Iraq or Afghanistan, and we created a law in that country that says that you can't stone people anymore, they would have lost their sovereignty in that process by us doing that. At that moment, they lost their sovereignty. And so we have this idea of sovereignty for nations, And in the times before nationalism, there was the sovereign, the individual despot or king or queen or whatever, who owned that title of sovereign. And they were granted that title, or that status, by being anointed by God. By being anointed by God. And so, at least that's how the culture and the civilization, well, the culture at that time viewed it, was that the person had the legitimate authority to rule the country because they were somebody that was given that power from the church or from God. And at this point, we as people, we as individual human beings need to inherit that status as a sovereign, and to not deny the legitimacy of authority outside of ourselves, but to inherit it in ourselves, so that we ourselves can be the sole authority in our lives, instead of it being from somewhere else. Because when you give that power away to some other authority, you are giving away what makes you a natural human being. And so this is one of the fundamental necessities, or the fundamental aspects of taking and actually owning your natural humanity. That's one of the first steps, is to inherit the fact that you are your sovereign. You are a sovereign. You, in yourself, have the power to make up your own laws and your own morality and so on. And that this is very important, because this is the only way that we are going to be, that first of all, we're going to be able to thwart planetary government. The only way that we can thwart planetary government, or take it, or prevent it from happening, is for every, or as many human beings as possible, to recognize their own sovereignty. Because that in itself is, I have the power, not you. Not money, especially. Don't give your sovereignty over to someone because they promise you money, or some kind of conveniences. Conveniences and money get us nowhere. We've shown that in the last 50 to 60 years, just from the time period of after World War II to now. We have so many more conveniences, yet so many more people are unhappy. So many people are unhealthy, that if you can draw a connection, if anything is the cause of that dissatisfaction and that overall disdain for humanity and the world that we live in, it's that we've replaced a culture based on principles and simplicity with a culture based on conveniences and money and entertainment. These things are vacuous. That's why people are trying so hard to replace that empty space with something else. That industrial flame has to replace a void, because they don't have a sense of inner spirituality. They've completely lost touch with the spiritual flame that rests within the natural human, within the heart of the natural human. And so this idea of personal or individual sovereignty has to be understood, and it has to be internalized and actually set into place. It has to be something that you acknowledge and that you, as an individual, carry with you into your daily life. And but more importantly, the idea, not just the idea that you yourself are a sovereign, but that everything, the planet itself, is a sovereign. And in that sense, planetary sovereignty, the only way for planetary organism, or for the planet to become an organism through our activity, which it is doing, the only way for that to come for that to fully flower, or for completely to develop, is when we recognize that every tree has sovereignty, that every animal has sovereignty, that every element has sovereignty, that every creature and every flora and fauna, every aspect of this planet is sovereign unto itself. This is what the Native Americans believed. And it's not, the reason I believe this, or the reason I'm saying this isn't because it's what the Native Americans believe, but because it's true. Because it is a natural truth. It is something that you don't have to dispute these things. They have autonomy under themselves. An eagle has autonomy. It has the power to make its own decisions. Yes, it can be domesticated, but so can humanity. What makes a human so much more special than a dog, and that it can be trained. A human can be more effectively trained than any other animal, really. It would even be argued that the reason that we have military and the reason that it's so effective is because we can be so easily broken, because we can be so easily trained. So don't fool yourself in thinking that just because animals can be domesticated means that they are somehow a lower creature, or that they don't deserve sovereignty any more than you do. We all, as creatures, deserve sovereignty, and we deserve to be recognized as sovereigns. And so does this planet into itself. Is that this planet deserves to be recognized as an organism, and it doesn't take much to really recognize that. If you look at the microscopic cells in your body and the blood flow through veins, and then you look side by side, cars on a road. If you look at them from the right distance or the right view, they look very similar, eerily similar. When you see cells, or when you see a kind of metropolis in your body of very large amounts of activity in one region of your body with your cells, and you look at a cityscape, a metropolis, they look very similar. But of course, it's there are certain aspects. A city looks, of course, a lot different from your body, from our perspective, and even from an aerial view. But still, there are aspects of it that resemble each other. There's the invention of the internet, and the use of cables, and the use of the communication through these various technologies. It acts like the neural network in your brain. It acts like the nervous system, or the sensory apparatus in your body. It is gradually, we are creating, through our technology, through our advancements, through our progress, we are developing a planetary organism. And if we could use these technologies appropriately, we could actually create a situation where the planetary organism and the planetary government, or the kind of system of governance that's created out of that, would actually be able to kind of transcend the limitations. And for instance, if you had the internet and you had free communication of all art, instead of people having to pay for music altogether, once you've created the internet, you've made it so that you can pretty much have the freedom of information, no matter what kind of information that is. All of it's free. But unfortunately, we still have this 20th century, even further, 18th century style government where that's impossible. And so we're faced with a situation where we have to, at this point, alter or abolish the systems that we have to be able to live in the present with what we've developed. In order for us to have, essentially what I'm saying is that the government has become obsolete. Once we invented the internet, all of our systems, including money, capitalism, all those things became obsolete. All of them. Regardless. Because as soon as you have something like the internet, the possibilities, it's like magnifying the possibilities of what you can do in a society by infinite fold. As soon as you invented the internet, as soon as the internet became available to the mass majority of people, we could have voting, we could vote for people into office so easily this way. But because there's a lot of distrust with the internet or whatever, because we live in the kind of society that we live in, it's not used. So there's a lot of things like that. We have all these inventions, but we don't even know what to do with them, because we, as a culture, are so immature. We don't know what to do with the things that we've created, because we don't even know who we are. We don't even know why we're here. We can't see past the limitations of simply the forms to which we're accustomed. We can't see past those forms. We're so indoctrinated and so conditioned to the apparatus, to the machine, that it's almost like somebody who's been in prison for so long that to be free terrifies them. That's the kind of situation that we face. People are so conditioned to the complacency. Really, it's like being in prison. They go out, they have a job, and then what compels them to come home and to sit on a chair for 8 hours is the television. Their house becomes their own prison. They don't go outside. One of the biggest privileges of being in prison is that you get recess time, essentially. And most people don't even use that in their daily lives. They go and they hermitate in front of a television for however many hours. Instead of actually, having what freedom that they have, they can go outside and experience nature and experience other people and have interactions with humanity. But instead of doing that, they watch television or they play video games. And so this is something that, no wonder people are depressed. No wonder people have this view that they can't do anything. I hate the world that I live in, but what can one person do about it? Well, one person sitting in front of a television for 8 hours a day can't do anything. They can't even make themselves, healthy. They can't even begin to do anything about it. So, of course, one person without any power who is cast away any of their responsibility, no, that person can't do anything. But somebody who believes in themselves and somebody who has the love in their heart to try and save humanity, those people do. Those people have been shown throughout history to do exactly that, change the world. And that's, I think, one of the biggest messages that I could possibly give in this talk, is just that fear is to human nature as love is to a natural human. To embrace love is to embrace the natural humanity within you and within everyone else. To embrace fear is to embrace the human nature, the artificial world that is being developed around us. Human nature wants you to be afraid, and wants you to be afraid to such an extent that you should probably take some pills for that. You might want to get on some meds, because you seem extra scared. Hey, I'm on Zoloft. I don't have any anxiety, so want some Zoloft? Would you like? It's like candy, just like candy. Is it worth it? Is it worth it to have this? And this is essentially, this is, I guess, going along with the whole character of what kind of society do we want to live in? Do we want to live in a more natural, more holistic view of the world, or do we want a situation where massive corporations are ruling our lives and creating our laws and forcing pills down our throat because we're not normal? You're not normal, so you should probably take some drugs. And yet, but don't take these kind of drugs. Don't take the ones that have been made in a lab before the ones that people have been using for thousands of years and have virtually no side effects. These things are just accepted as just common sense. Of course you're going to take a pill from a scientist that you don't know, that isn't anything close to being perfect. Nature is perfect. Nature is beautiful. Take a plant, put it in some water, boil the water, you get tea. Tea is a drug. Tea is like marijuana, but it's legal because millions of people like it. And they recognize it as something that is just pleasant. But when it comes to something like cannabis, people are terrified of it, and they think that it's a scourge. Well, how did that come into being? And I'm not going to get too much into the idea of, these kind of natural, I would even just call them medicines, but these things in themselves are not the problem with our society. The problem with our society is that we have too many laws. It's a fundamental truth. It's something that's written in the Tao Te Ching. The more laws you have, the more people you're going to have in prison. How many people do we have in prison in America? More than the entire world. More than anywhere in the world we have people in prison. But this all ties back to human nature versus natural humanity. Nature is so terrifying because it means that we're not in absolute domination or control of ourselves. Nature implies a chaos, a chaotic structure that cannot be controlled. And so human nature's attempt to dominate and control nature is what is at hand there. The domination of nature, that it's because of fear. The early humans, early in our history, there was a lot to be scared of in nature, especially on the plains in Africa. I mean, that's just, on the plains in Africa, there's a lot to be scared of now, let alone you have an elephant gun. Imagine if you didn't have anything, you had a spear. That's terrifying. So the attempt then to control nature in such a way that we can survive has dominated the ideology of the natural human. It is a natural human tendency to want to survive, but that desire has overridden, through time, has overridden our natural humanity in the first place. We've lost touch with our natural humanity and have adopted instead the cube. And what human nature is, in that sense, is a coffin. It has turned an idea, the idea of survive, dominate nature, and conform to human nature. Conformity to human nature is essentially getting into the coffin, the box for your mind, and just letting it take over, letting that guide your life instead of your own individual curiosity and your own humanness. And these are things. It's not something that you have to learn. It's something that you have to unlearn. All the things that you have been told, that you've been conditioned to believe, you have to unlearn in order to embrace your natural humanity. Instead of it doesn't require any learning at all. And that's the beautiful, the most important part of it. You don't have to learn anything. All you have to do is unlearn all the bull and inherit and just embrace what you are already. It's not something you have to put any effort into. It's just like enlightenment. It's not something that you have to go in search of. You already are a natural human being. We all are natural human beings. It's just it takes an amount of stripping the clothes off, removing the covering that is hiding the innate truth of your natural humanity. And so I guess that's the first part.
I think one major problem is that we become unwillingly trained that we are the same as the expendable things that are put in front of us. And that leads to such a level of complacency that we will never move forward.
Right, and that's one of the things that I like to say is that it's called consumerism because you are the one being consumed by this process. that is what we're essentially doing, is we're consuming ourselves. We're actually, it's like cannibalism, but on
For
a
the
whole
soul.
different level.
Yeah.
For the soul, for the planet, from the most simple aspect to the most complex, we are consuming ourselves. From the planetary level to the individual spiritual level, and everywhere in between, we are consuming ourselves. Which is, of course, that's a very good point. And we are, that's another thing is I've heard this phrase or whatever, it's that people have lost themselves, or we as humanity have lost ourselves because we have started to think, we began to love things and use people instead of loving people and using things.
Well, I was going to ask, there's a lot of people out there who advocate that it's not necessarily capitalism that's at fault, it's just that there's so many problems with the state involved with how capitalism is working and how it's been corrupted by corporations and stuff, and how people have taken it to extremes that, and as a fundamental system, capitalism, or free market capitalism, will actually work. How do you respond to people who basically claim that it's not the system of capitalism that is at fault, but rather it's the state's intervention within capitalism that is kind of making things the way they are today?
Well, you have to first take into account who invented the term free trade. And what it has been used for in the past. And you also have to kind of look not at the ideology, but at the reality of things like capitalism. And the tree you will recognize the tree by its fruit. What has capitalism created? It has created not a transcendental future of flying cars and so forth. All it's created is junk. All it's created is conveniences. All it's done is promote the already insane impetus of humanity to avoid its nature and inherit its artificiality, inherit someone else's idea of what's better, what's more perfect. And so capitalism, if you have a free market, what that really means is that the companies will have free reign to do whatever they want. And what that does, especially for globalism, is that it speeds it up rapidly. And it's not, it is a very complex issue because it does come from the government. But where does the government get its power in the first place? From allowing corporations to come into existence so that they can get massive amounts of money. The money funds the government. The government creates the corporations. They're basically, corporations are offspring of the government. Corporations are a creation of the government. So one creates, the child is then created by the government, and then the child then controls the parent, which is kind of similar to how our society works today. Parents worship their children. Buy them whatever they want, the children control the parents. This is a situation where capitalism may or may not be the worst situation possible. What we can definitely agree is that there is a constant evolution. And if we're using an ideology that's over 200 or 300 years old, we're falling behind. We need to progress beyond what was able to get us through yesterday. Those things worked. And I'm not saying that capitalism is an evil. I'm saying that capitalism is obsolete. We need to take progressive steps into the next century in order to get there. Otherwise, we'll just.
Well, see, when I look at it, I totally agree with the statement that a lot of people make that the inherent psychology of market capitalism kind of enforces this competitive nature for exploitation and domination of other people in order to get your higher place on the totem pole, because that's kind of what it promotes, is this competitive nature of reality as opposed to like a cooperative one. But when you really look at it, I think when people argue on the side of capitalism or on the side of these other different economic systems, and in response to the one that you're about to propose, I guess in your second part, the reciprocism, right? Yeah, I think it really comes down to people are operating on a different level of consciousness, so they see things differently. So you see people on capitalism are very concerned with their individuality and their ego thriving and being the best possible version of themselves as possible, you know what I mean, and really claiming their individuality as much as possible so that they can kind of thrive in their own way. Then you see people on a more of a socialism perspective that kind of think that, you know, we should look at the world as one synergistic, holistic system and treat it as such, and that no human being or animal or anything should be excluded from that, and that we should be able to find a way to allocate resources properly to kind of distribute them so that everybody has a chance to enjoy the bountiful abundance that is so readily available instead of just a select few. But what it really comes down to, like, where I'm not sure what I think yet is what exactly is the primary concern in regards to how do we attack that situation? Like, in other words, is it the economic system itself that's at fault, or is it the spiritual implications of the levels of consciousness that human beings are on? And how do we deal with people that see on these different perspectives, people that see things on, I guess, the more individualistic perspective of capitalism versus the people who see on, I guess you could call it, a more unity conscious level of perspective, where they see everything as one whole system that should be treated as kind of, they're just part of that whole system, and that the whole system or the whole family of humans should be taken care of instead of just, you know, a select few. Like, what is the best way, I guess, to go about that situation?
Well, it is both ideological and spiritual. There is a problem of the same ideology or the same train of thought that created capitalism is not going to solve the problems created by capitalism. And so we need to first have in ourselves, develop in ourselves, an ideology or an idea or a worldview that is a counterpoint to the capitalistic or self-interested or whatever. I mean, honestly, I don't see any problem with self-interest. I believe that certain aspects of things like reciprocism actually promote not only the betterment of the individual, but also the betterment of the collective. And I think that is a huge part of how that ideology of capitalism can be turned into something else, is that you have to have competitiveness or a sense of self-competitiveness, not competition with someone else necessarily, but even just with yourself, that it can be that problem can then be transcended, or that you can have a situation that's much more beneficial to the individual and to the collective. And not only that, but I'd also like to say that there is if we were to look at the human body or the body of an animal in general and use that as a reference for how to create an economy, you're using a perfect system. The human body is a perfect system for economy, as a reference to what economy should be. The human body does not have, the more important a cell is, the more resources it gets. It's just how it works. And every cell in the body, though, every single cell in the body receives energy or food, it receives protection and medical care. The effectiveness of the cellular economy has stood the test of time, and that it has supported the survival of the human body for millions of years. Additionally, the body's economy has proven to be durable and flexible enough to support human adaptation to the widest range of environmental challenges. Consequently, understanding economic exchanges among the body's cellular community logically help us design a more successful model of human economic management. At its most basic level, cellular economics is simply the study of how living systems apportion and use energy in order to work and produce. While the units of exchange may range from dollars to donuts, all economies are based on an exchange of work, which of course equates to energy. To maintain a cell and empower its functions, a body expends energy as it works to produce and process food. Cells then extract energy from that food and store it in the form of stable ATP molecules, which is the cellular equivalent of money. ATP coins are exchanged among the community's cells as salaries to cover the cost of expended energy for operations such as digestion, respiration, neuroprocessing, movement, reproduction, and waste elimination. And so
in regards to what you said earlier about, like, you know, the industries of food production and the medical industry and things of that nature, would you say that things like GMOs or pesticides are inherently bad and they have no practical positive uses? Or things like in the medical industry, like the medical institutions, hospitals, and the medicine that they provide have no practical applications at all? Or are they just kind of few and far between and applicable only to certain situations? Or do they not even apply at all?
I would say that these institutions, if they aren't beneficial or if they are harmful, it's because of an ideological problem, not because they're innately a problem. How you go about genetically modifying a plant is important. If you're genetically modifying it so that it can produce 12 times as much and need 12 times less, go you. But if you're combining it with a pesticide, or you're combining it with some kind of another creature altogether that you don't even know what you're doing, right, what is actually going to be the result, or if you're creating something that, like just like in that same instance where you don't really know what you're creating, but as long as it has the right, as long as it looks right. As long as it looks right, or as long as it doesn't look like a mutant, you know, like with arms and legs and stuff, you're fine. And that's the. Other than that, these things are a stepping stone. These things are a technological and ideological stepping stone, which are being. The reason that they can be negative is because of how they are gone about it, how it's gone about,
how it's being used,
rather than that it is being used. How it's being used in this current day and age is very highly destructive, and it's done irresponsibly. And it's done irresponsibly principally because we as a civilization or as a culture are children. We're still children. The reason we're still children is because we haven't inherited our innate sovereignty, because we haven't developed our natural humanity, because we haven't been able to recognize our place in the universe. We're still children. We haven't gotten to that point where we've grown enough to be able to recognize who and what we are without any kind of conflict. Unfortunately, this has happened because of the variety of religions and those institutions. Not the religions in themselves, but the institutions that then try to replace human critical thinking with indoctrination and control. And so these, like anything, these things are a stepping stone towards a better world. It has to, technology and economy and government has to evolve. All of these things had to go through their stages before they got to a more perfect situation. The American Revolution occurred because it was being oppressed by the tyrannical regime of Great Britain. If that didn't happen, America wouldn't come into existence, and there would have been a great amount of time between a better system than what we had. So all of these things are necessary. They're necessary, but they're not perfect. In order to create more perfect systems, we have to throw off the slop of the systems that we have in place now, the diseased flesh of these systems have to be thrown off and replaced, and we have to heal our planet. We have to heal our planet at this point. That is our kind of, as having been created by this planet, we owe it that much to heal it of all the damage that has been created by humanity itself. And it bespeaks the planetary organism of the economy of a planet, of an organism, is such that all the cells are paid equally in terms of what they need. And if they are more beneficial or more necessary to the body, they will receive what they need to process as they do. They will even have cadres of other cells. They will actually have helpers that will help them to do whatever they need to do in the process of the body. When you have an economy based on this kind of principle, people aren't going to be, no one will be living to survive. There will not be any homeless people. There will not be any, poverty will essentially be done away with. There are more houses in this country than there are people. More vacant houses than there are homeless. And the only reason those people are not housed is because, well, screw him. He's not getting any money. He doesn't have any money. He stinks. Throw him out into the cold and let him out. It's an ideology. It's inhumanity towards humanity. And the inhumanity comes from the human nature. It doesn't come innately within us. We aren't innately inhumane to one another. We are trained that way by our culture. And so it's time to start a new dialogue, a new culture, a new society. And that new society has to come about at a grassroots level. It's not something that is going to just kind of light switch and it's going to happen. But it is something that we as people who recognize this need to begin to communicating that to other people. And it's not just, it has to be done seriously and with organization, or else it will be looked at as something just like the hippies or something like the New Age movement or something like, so on and so forth. It has to be something that is fought for. And the reason it has to be fought for, not necessarily with the use of violence, but with the use of non-violence. It has to be fought for seriously. Because, like I said, there is a war. There is a war against humanity by humanity. And we have to recognize that conflict, or establish that as a reality before it's too late, before we do have a world government and we can't escape it, no matter where we get it. Because world government is coming, it's coming. And it's not going to be what people envision it as, like Star Trek. That's a situation of planetary organism. We've created a planetary organism. The only way for us to escape this planet, or not to escape it, but to travel the stars, is for this planet to become a planetary organism rather than a world government. The world government will destroy humanity and nature along with it. But the planetary organism will develop humanity and the species on this planet. So from there, okay, the idea of the world citizen. Imagine a new dialogue. Imagine a new scenario in which human beings are citizens of not one nation, not one area or place on the planet, but as Earthlings, we inherit our own world citizenship. And by doing so, even if you aren't living everywhere, even if you go travel to all of these different places in the world, just inheriting the fact that you were born on the planet Earth. You weren't born in America or in Venezuela or in Germany. You were a child of the Earth, of this planet, and of this solar system and the universe. You're not a child of this small, tiny fragment. No wonder our culture is so schizophrenic, because it is so fragmented, it is so broken up, and it doesn't make any sense. And so, imagine a planet, a world a world society, a world civilization. This is what is Michio Kaku, a theoretical physicist from NYU. He has gone through, he's listed out the stages of civilization. It goes through 0 through 3. You have a level 0 civilization, which is what we have, where we are using fossil fuels, and we don't derive our energy from anything but the combustion of certain elements, and we don't have certain things like interstellar travel. We've only gotten to the moon so far, and level 1 civilization, which is what I'm trying to kind of speak about right here, is the idea that we've derived energy from the planet itself. The ambient energy around us can be harnessed for whatever purposes we want to use them for. And the level 1 civilization would have to use a different kind of economic system. There have been people who have suggested things like a gift economy or a resource-based economy. And what I have come up with in terms of an alternative system is something called reciprocism, which is just a reciprocal economy. It's an economy that feeds into itself, a reciprocal. And what that is, so imagine a situation where instead of taxation, you reverse that. You reverse that principle, or that idea, that paradigm, where the government pays you to be a citizen. The government not pays you, but the government gives back to you. Imagine a situation where instead of throngs of people are throwing their money at a government to give them conveniences of roads or whatever, that it would be a situation where the people are given the gift of things like food, clothing, shelter, transportation, information, medical care. All those things are, call them privileges, perhaps. Privileges, not rights necessarily, because nobody is entitled to these things innately as a human being. But if you are a contributing member, if you are a part of the system, then you are given a perk of being a citizen. And you have to, in this system, it wouldn't be something that you are born into, because that would be slavery. That would be the worst kind of slavery, is if you were forced to work in a system that you had no control over. But rather, you have a situation where you are choosing to be a part of the planetary body, or the body of the system. And once you are a cell in that body, you are given everything that you need to be self-actualized. And anything that's extra is what you're working for. How much you benefit the world. Not that you do. That you do grants you those privileges. How much you do grants you the conveniences. The reason why you're having the sense of competition with yourself is to, I want more than I had last time. You have maybe like every 4 months you're evaluated or something like that, and you get a certain amount of resources or a certain amount of conveniences. Like at a certain point, let's say you're a quantum physicist or you're a nuclear physicist and you're helping create reactors, or you're a part of the system that creates the energy on this planet, or something of that sort. You could have your own private jet. But everybody else would be free to travel on any jet. You wouldn't have to spend money, quote unquote, to travel. It's something that would be free. It would just be a free service. Now, this is also assuming that we're not using fossil fuels in our systems. This assumes that at a certain point, our technological advancement is going to reach a threshold where we're not going to even use fossil fuels anymore. So it won't be something where you have to spend inordinate amounts of money. And this is something that has been coming for a long time, where technology replaces human beings. We're reaching the point where we're going to have to face it. Human beings aren't going to be needed in factories anymore. there's certain roles and certain applications that human beings are being phased out. And the only way for us to have a system that makes any sense and that can cope or adapt to that system, to that coming system, is if we have a system like resource-based or reciprocal-based economies. Because the money is going to be second of little consequence. Because I'm not going to be able to get money if I'm phased out by the robots and by the machines. What has to happen is, I'm a human being. I deserve to have a life. I deserve to have these things because I am a sovereign, because you are a sovereign. We need to be able to share the resources, not because there's this contribution that this person is making, but because they innately deserve it as being a human being. That's the objective of something like reciprocism, is to get people from the first stage, which is to I have money, I have these resources, and I can get what I want with it. But where does this money come from? What makes a $1 bill more or less expensive or valuable than a $100 bill? What makes a $1 bill more valuable than a $100 bill? It's made of the same material. All it has is different patterns in the material. But somehow that's viewed as more valuable. People will even look up at it and say, "Oh, make sure this really is what it is." And actually, it has no value. The reason it has value is because you think it has value. When you take away that, what is all of this based off of in the first place? I believe that you deserve to have this thing. You've given me this. You've given me something. Let me give you something in return. Now, apply that to a system where it recognizes your contributions to society just by being a citizen. Just by being a citizen, it means that you had to contribute somehow. So what's the holdup? Why have the middleman? If I'm producing wealth into the economy, why have the middleman of money and banks and the government that has to facilitate all of it? It's overcomplicated, and it needs to be overcomplicated so that people can't understand it, so that people will be confused and will be forced to succumb to it. Because otherwise, if it was as simple as hey, it's a monopoly game. The world that we live in is essentially a monopoly game. If you explained it to people like that, there would be and this is something that actually Henry Ford said himself. If people understood the economy and the system of how the economy works, there would be a revolution by tomorrow. If people understood how it works, but because there's all the jargon, just like in the medical field, there's a lot of jargon that people use in these fields to make it obscure, to make it obtuse, or to make it abstruse.
Almost elitist. In a sense.
Well, not almost elitist. In order to get into these fields of politics and to be a doctor, you have to go through an extensive amount of education. And education is unto itself a huge aspect of improving our society. And it goes to Thomas Jefferson in terms of the quote that I like to read. Men by their constitution are naturally divided into two parties. Those who fear and distrust the people and wish to draw all powers from them into the hands of the higher classes. Secondly, those who identify themselves with the people and have confidence in them, cherish and consider them as the most honest and safe, although not the most wise, depository of the public interest. In every country these two parties exist, and in every one where they are free to think, speak, and write, they will declare themselves. Call them therefore liberals and serviles, Jacobins and ultras, Whigs and Tories, Republicans and Federalists. They are the same parties still and pursue the same object. The last appellation or naming of them are aristocrats and democrats, and that is the true expression of the essence of all. That there are two political parties. There are the aristocrats who believe that the people need to be controlled, and then there are the Democrats who believe that through education the people can control and rule themselves. And the reason that the people are being controlled in the first place is because of the education system having been completely flush down the toilet. And that is something that has happened over 100 or so years, but it's gradually happened such that we don't even recognize it as a population, that not most of us anyway, that the education system is for naught. And so in order to have a better world, we need to have a better education system. We need to, the only way that we're going to be able to radically change the systems like education and government is by having a different economic system or premise altogether. That's why I promote the concept of reciprocation or reciprocal government. And so in order for reciprocism to exist, and in order for the different education to exist, there would have to be a new kind of a governmental apparatus. There would have to be some. I'm under the prescription of healing the governmental superorganism by instituting a new kind of governmental structure. And one of them is, okay, so to begin with, the first form of governance is top-down. Civilizations have employed them like kings and emperors throughout the centuries. Okay, so and it is like a triangle. The pyramid structure, it's top-down. It expands to the masses on that kind of level. So the second form of governance involves a set of rules and agreements created by the populace rather than arbitrary rule of a top-down hierarchy. This is depicted as a form of governance as a box. It's like a box. And you put the Constitution into that box. Different kinds of rules and regulations fit into that box so that it can contain them. And just as adolescents break loose from parental authority to explore their own power and resources, our founding fathers offered their fellow nationalists or colonists, as the wherewithal to independent individuals, so they created the box-shaped structure. Okay. So then the next one, which is something that is to come, is the circle. There's a third shape of governance, a circle, that can enable our species to achieve humanifest destiny, quote unquote. Every point in a circle is equidistant from the center and is equally important to maintain the shape of the circle. Therefore, the circle represents interdependence, not to be confused with codependence. Interdependence means a community of capable, diverse, and co-equal individuals who recognize the self-interest and mutual interests are of one and the same. And this is an idea by a man named Jim Ruff, who has actually done the experimenting with this idea using councils. And he calls them the wisdom councils. And he has done these in places like Norway and places in Europe to great success. And what they've come to the conclusion of through these studies is that the people in a population are the wisest, even more so than the individual wise people, like the experts. They actually come to conclusions that are more effective than the experts in their areas, if you go about it in a particular kind of way. So then the next even after the circle is the form of a box in a circle, or a circle, box inside of a circle. Inside the box, governmental program or paradigms would still hold elections and make and enforce laws. However, the box, which contains our constitutional independence, would exist inside the interdependent circle of we the people. So essentially what you have is the people are on top of the political totem pole. And there are ways to go about doing that. For instance, say if you were to have elections for the people in that circle, in that council, instead of just lottoing them in. You could lotto them in, you could have them be random people, but at the same time you could also have elections. But the best way to is to have the people, have that council directly responsible or directly in communication with the people themselves, such that you have the people are at the top of the totem pole politically. And so the council runs by the suggestions of the people at a direct level, and those people can be kicked out at any time, given the people's response to that system. As long as the people think that they're doing a good job, which they, in a system like this, let's say if you're using reciprocism, the people then have the time to devote to scrutinizing their government. When you create a situation where no one has time to give scrutiny to the system, you've allowed tyranny to replace and to come into existence. You've allowed the conditions that are necessary for tyranny and despotism to thrive. When the people cannot speak up about their own situations because they're too busy surviving, you have them in survival mode, they're perfectly susceptible to being controlled and dominated. And so in order for this council to exist, you first have to have reciprocism in place. And in order for reciprocism to be effective, you have to have an education system that is not only just for children, but for adults, that spans the lifetime. From infancy to adulthood, which cultivates the natural human in its essence, which is not teaching them what to think, but how to think. And there have been different forms of education throughout the centuries that are very effective in that, namely the trivium and quadrivium, which are the 7 classical subjects of classical education, the liberal arts education. And so from that, from having a council, in order for reciprocism to work, the council itself has to have a branch, like an office, to investigate the beneficial acts or the contributions that are made by people to the society. That would have to come from the council itself and be answerable to that council, because then that basically puts the people in control of their own economy. So what is beneficial is determined by the people, and then that being carried out is used by the council and disseminated to this office. And this office would essentially be of a completely different character, but essentially in a similar kind of manner as the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, all these agencies, to root out and punish evil deeds, injustice. Except it's put into the opposite direction, to root out and discover and to reward contributions to society. So it's a totally different character of the nature of government as far as what we're using it for. But imagine, there's so many agencies to punish people and their bad deeds, but none of them are used to promote and to reward good deeds. So how is this helping our society at all? To have these, you can just tell that this is something that's completely kind of, now that I think about it, that is kind of crazy. Why do we have so many agencies to punish people and to find evil deeds? Isn't it? Are you kind of isn't it a self-fulfilling prophecy when you do it that way? Isn't it kind of self-fulfilling and it's just like creating a country in the first place. If you create a military, you're gonna have war. If you have a military, people are gonna feel threatened and they're gonna come and attack you. Whereas if you don't have a military, how can they possibly justifiably fight and kill you and slaughter you?
Or just that the people in the industry are making a military all of a sudden need to have a purpose. So we should be at war with these people.
Right.
It's a punitive design.
So more onto this office that I'm talking about. This office is replacing the idea of these different FBI and CIA and so forth. These people would go and they would monitor your contributions and then simply enter that into a database, and then you would be recognized as a citizen from that moment on. You have to request this. This is not something that they just go and do. You have to come to them and request it. It's a choice that you make. This is a choice. So you have a situation where I'm going to them and I'm getting this, their service essentially to me is to evaluate or observe my service and to then put it into a database, whatever you want to call it. And so, if you were a musician, he would then view, his role would be something like Rolling Stones, or the Rolling Stone magazine. He would go there and he would record or view what you've done, what you do, put it, and you would have maybe a recording, you would then put that into the public database and promote it. And however far you got with it would be however much resources you'd be allocated to improve whatever you're doing. Whatever you need, you'd be provided it. Let's say if you were making tomato sauce and you had the best tomato sauce in town, you would then receive resources necessary to continue that production. And if you felt like you could improve it and expand that, then you'd be allocated however many resources you believe you could create more produce. And so this would be something you'd be evaluated every 4 months. If you were doing a spectacular job, excellent, you would be given more resources. If you didn't, and you had actually less than you had expected, then you'd be given less resources.
I have a quick question. So these people that are evaluating, or I guess these people that are kind of coming in and viewing what you're doing, they're more of a promotional kind of idea, as opposed to like they're going in and judging you and they're making the decision. They're promoting what you're doing, then the public gets to decide through a voting process basically what they want to keep or what they want to have build up, and then based on that contribution, or based on that analysis, then the branch will analyze what exactly else you need to pursue what you're doing, like what other resources you could possibly need.
That would be something that could be given disseminated to the people. That agency would then say, hey, this person needs these resources, and the people then could come and donate those, or it could be something that the people then give to the government that then gives it to them. But essentially the idea is that the resources will be allocated as they need to in order for these things to continue to exist. Because you don't have a currency like money that would then you could then directly give to someone, it's more a matter of you give them whatever they need to get those resources. Either giving them directly those resources, like more tomatoes. Let's say if you're a farmer and you have a lot of tomatoes, you give them those tomatoes. Or if you're the government, you say, let's have a project to help this person out. Let's make a building, like a greenhouse, where they can have all the necessary things that they would need. And this is all basically community organization. And it has to do with, this is all something that has more legitimacy on the grassroots level. The purpose of this is to develop community. One of the other aspects of this council is to promote festivals and community events, essentially, to bring the people together so that they all know each other, and then so that you can actually have a situation that people are working together for their different goals. This is also the purpose of the education system. The purpose of the education system under this idea is that it is like the epicenter. The people come to the education system to grow their garden. They come to that facility to teach their whatever their field is. Let's say if you're a martial artist, you could teach martial arts at the school. Let's say if you're a farmer, you could have your own farm on the premises of the school. If you're a chef, you could be a chef at the school. If you are a Spanish-speaking person, you could teach infants that language at that school. And there's a lot of different ways that you could help out, but essentially the idea is to create an education system where everybody can work at the education system. And the incentive to do that is because if you're employed by the education system, you get about the equivalent of what an athlete is paid. So imagine how many people would want to be a part of that system if they're getting the resources necessary to be able to live, not just to survive, but to thrive in their work.
And I was going to say that's really good for the competition of getting better teachers, people who are better and better and better in their fields.
Ideally, at the middle school level, you have people that are like professors, or even in the elementary school level, that are professors of their field. And the other thing about that is you have a child psychologist in the classroom to help facilitate as like a catalyst between the teacher and the students, so that the students would be able to understand what they're being taught more effectively. And so that the teacher will not be like, damn kids! You know, at a certain point, the teacher gets so frustrated that they can't even handle the job. They have unruly students and so forth.
You can't expect one adult to in any way connect or communicate in a meaningful way with 32 young people in the class?
Well, that depends. See, the way we have gone through education is that we have one teacher for about 45 minutes, and then we go to another teacher for about 45 minutes.
Right.
Part of the system that I'm talking about, one teacher per day for 7 hours. And those 7 hours, though, would be broken up by hour-long recesses. And those recesses would actually be practical. They would go to, let's say, gardening for recess. Or they would go to martial arts and meditation or Eastern practices for another recess. Art and music for another recess. And so you break up the day so they'd always be learning.
So it would be more of an enrichment recess than just a play around recess or run from the dodgeball. Yeah.
The last recess of the day would be played. There'd be 3 hours of the actual study of the subject. But that's a lot. It's a lot of information. And then at the end of the day, they'd have the classical running around recess where they're just having fun. You have these practical recesses so that they can get in. It kind of bespeaks the idea that learning is play. There is a play that can happen in learning that is even more effective than the teacher with a chalkboard and this and that. And this is not only that, but it's getting them into a comfortable state of that it's fun to be at school. And that's the idea of it, is to engage them so effectively that they actually love coming there. And so that I call this idea developmental education, because you use the stages of development to gauge what kind of information you're teaching them in the first place. So there is you start small, gradually work your way up. And in middle school, there would be something like teachers would be basically professors or experts at their field, and especially in elementary school and so forth. But when they get to high school, students would be given a kind of education that's so much more practical than learning specifically, but they would also be given the responsibility of going and finding their own information. Learning high school would be more like a library in as far as the learning aspect, but practically speaking, they go and they learn architecture, plumbing, and how to drive a car, and all of the permaculture or hydrodynamics in water and creating structures like that, instead of the sociology or whatever. That would be on their own time. And the school itself would be like a library where they'd have immense amounts of resources available to them, but it would be their responsibility to go and find it. But that's that as far as that is concerned, that's what their responsibility would be for learning. But in terms of practical learning, there would be a facilitation of like the architecture and all that kind of stuff. The next part is more about starting the necessary evolution towards getting that actual system into place. Not in terms of literally setting it up, but in terms of getting ourselves and our friends and the people around us into a place where they can maybe think about these ideas, think about them seriously and in a way that changing their mind. And there's a better way to live than through conveniences and money. And so stepping outside the box, basically. What we need to do, really, is to inherit our own natural humanity. That's fundamentally, like I said, the most important aspect of getting out of the box, is recognizing what you are in the first place. Because the same premise or the same ideology that got us here is not what's going to get us out. We're not going to spend our way out of this. We're not going to be able to heal ourselves and the planet by perpetuating the system that's already in place. At this point, we have to recognize that the only way we're going to solve these problems is really by breaking it down. And the other thing is, you can try to avoid it, you can try to escape it, but it's coming for you. Because it is going to be a global government, it's not going to be something that you can escape or find refuge from. So we have to fight it. we have to fight it directly. We have to go up to its doorstep and kind of, kick it out, essentially, kick it out. And so, yeah, I mean, most of us in this room kind of already have this sense of like, get out and get involved. Get outside. Get away from the TV. Keep yourself away from the TV as much as possible. Keep everybody that you know away from the TV. And try to like, try to save people from not only just the TV. The TV is a toxic thing. And it's toxic to your brain. And the food that we eat in modern times is toxic to your body. So in the same way, we have to avoid those toxic foods as well. We have to bring people to the recognition that these things are unhealthy, and that we need to different kind of food. We need to be eating different kinds of things. The other thing is, so you go from television is toxic to your brain. What is healthy to your brain? Reading. It's something that it gives you a lot of power, and the power that comes with going to a library and reading a book. Library and liberation have a similar derivation in the word. L-I-B-E-R is it means to be free, to have empowerment, self-empowerment. The only way that we are going to liberate ourselves is by going to the library, essentially. The common sense of yesterday still applies today. And we've lost sense of common sense. We've lost completely that and it's for our detriment. So educate yourself. That's what we first need to do. Is we as individuals here and outside of here need to educate ourselves, principally. Whatever you thought maybe you were interested in at one time or another, educate yourself about it. Educate yourself to the point where you can talk to another person proficiently about it. I'm not saying become a professional at whatever you're reading. I'm just saying read something. Read something of practical value. Because if you're not reading something that can actually apply to your life, if you're reading fantasy novels all the time, you're not helping yourself. You're learning how to read more effectively maybe, but you're not learning how to live more effectively. You're not learning how to liberate yourself. Learn how to make how to get water. Learn like how to purify water. How to get food in case the grocery store shuts down. Learn how to survive, basically. And and then from there, and this is something that's kind of innate to learning in the first place, the more educated you are, the less likely you are to be hostile to other people. The more likely you are to love other people. Because the more educated you are, the more you get to see, the more you come to see that there's a lot about human nature that is deceptive. And a lot of it is about how different we all are. And unfortunately, the human nature has confused and destroyed those connections that are innate to the natural human world. Those connections that, first of all, we as human beings, we have eyes, we have a nose, we have a face, and we have a humanity that is innate in each and every one of us. He thinks differently than me. His beliefs are different from mine. He's a Republican and I'm a Democrat, or vice versa. He's a homosexual and I'm a homophobe. I'm a Christian and he's an atheist. These different ideologies aren't bringing about the kind of world that they promote in the first place. It's actually backfired. All of these ideologies backfire to a certain degree in that they don't bring people together. What they do is they make you a distinction from another person. If we didn't have these, if we were completely natural, if we lived without these, we would be so much happier, and we would love one another so much more. But because they exist, they confuse the mind about what is important and what's not. And so what we need to do first is to love thy neighbor, basically. To come into a perspective where, regardless of what someone's beliefs are, regardless of how they have distinguished themselves from others, there is still the humanity that is innately in them that you need to love, because if you don't love them, how can you love yourself? You are them. You are that. Regardless of what they believe and how they see the world, you are at a level. You share the DNA that they have. You share the human existence as they do. There's so much about us that's similar, and so little that is different. And yet we let those things run amok.
If I could, real quick, when you say human nature, are you referring to the idea of like the human condition, or are you referring to the idea in psychology of like the nature versus nurture argument, whether or not there is an inherent behavioral mechanism embedded within our genetic structure, or is it environmentally conditioned through what is now an emerging science known as epigenetics, which Bruce Lipton from that book actually talks a lot about?
It's human nature as I define it, and I should have maybe said this a lot earlier, but human nature as I define it is an artificial environment that has been created by humanity to replace nature, to replace it because it has to dominate. It has to dominate nature. There's a war against nature, and it is human nature that is being applied to replace it. The city is a perfect example of the human nature. It is an environment that is completely human. There is virtually no plant life in a city. The room, the house, is an example of human nature. It is diametrically opposed to the geometric patterns found in nature. It is a place where you go to escape the trials and tribulations of nature. It is a way to remove the human being from nature in order to save them from it, and in order for them to kind of escape the natural world. And so human nature is both the world, or the human perspective of like human nature versus natural, the tabula rasa, the idea that there's a blank slate, and you can give them certain ways of thinking and so forth, or that there's a condition of humanity, that there is like the idea. I view natural humanity as human nature, as what we think of as human nature. It's something that isn't necessarily that you can pin down. It's something that, like nature, is always transforming based on the environment. It, you could say, is human nature to succumb to human nature, to the human nature as I define it. The world that's been replacing the natural world is something that people are kind of naturally inclined to succumb to because it's so easy. It's the convenient thing to do. It's not simple, and it's not principled or moral, but it's easy. It's so easy. It's like someone telling you that they have the nectar, like honey. They say, hey, do you want to try some honey? And all you have to do is say yes. And then as soon as you take that honey, you're hypnotized. And that's really, when you watch TV, that's basically what's happening to your brain as you're becoming hypnotized. So it's very easy. It's so much easier to succumb to the human nature than it is to the natural humanity, because you have to learn for yourself what your natural humanity is. You can't be told what your natural humanity is. Anything that somebody's telling you is human nature is actually a result of that artificial world that we've created. Human nature is the real human nature. The natural human is determined by his environment or her environment. It's not something that you can say that there is this definite human nature that outside of this situation, it will still apply. It has to do with the context. The natural human is plastic in the sense of like clay. It's moldable, malleable. And instead, through the artificial human nature, the artificial human world, they've turned plastic. In the sense of Barbie, plastic. We've gone from plasticity to a doll, where we're just representations of the environment of human nature. And so, like I was saying, though, there's human nature is to fear as natural human is to love. So, at the fundamental level, we have to embrace our natural humanity and dissolve the artificial human world that we have created and more incorporate nature into our environments that we're creating for ourselves, making cities more like a garden, making the world more like a garden. And maybe like the Zen Buddhists used their sand gardens, creating an aesthetic through the plants and through the different kinds of structures that we can create, making those things more aesthetically beautiful and making the world around us less like a box. Look at the cities that we live in. All it is just box-shaped buildings that have no aesthetic qualities to them at all.
It's all grid-based.
It's all grid-based. It's all mathematically mapped out. It's not something that the funny thing is that if we were to use a different kind of geometry, it would be so much more beautiful. Using fractal geometry, we'd be able to have cities that were extraordinarily beautiful. And that's the principle of the next civilization's architecture is fractal geometry and the use of creating environments that are both practical and beautiful and stimulating. All of these things in one. Having those kind of structures in place will actually improve our psychology and our how we go about actual practical matters and doing things. And so, that's the beautiful part about it is that when we do inherit the natural humanity, we do also inherit an appreciation of nature and the beauty of nature. And it's more easy to recognize how disgusting a city is structured, just based on its structure, the massive cube structures that are created and how diametrically opposed that is to nature. And why are we so afraid of nature? Why are we so opposed to natural structures? Is it because it's chaotic, or is it because we don't understand it?
One and the same.
But as soon as we do inherit the acceptance of chaos as something that is necessary and beautiful, then psychologically we can start to recognize in ourselves that it's okay that I don't know myself, that I am chaotic, and that I do things that I want regardless of what somebody else is telling me. A lot of the problems psychologically that people have, it comes from the idea that somebody gave them. They've been told that they should feel bad about this, so they feel, should I? But it's still what they want. It's still what they will do. But then they feel this guilt about it afterwards, which is totally unnecessary. It's something that they don't deserve to feel bad about it. Nobody is judging them. There is no judgment from on high by anyone or anything. It's something that they put on themselves.
I have a question about your system of reciprocism. As far as internal conflict goes between people, because that's going to happen eventually at some point. There's always discrepancies between people, whether it's, whatever. How would that manage that kind of conflict between communities, between individuals, and between larger... Well, just on
Killed my child, let me beat the crap out of him?
Just like when internal conflict, like that kind of thing brews, say for example you have somebody, who slept with somebody else's wife, and the guy gets real pissed off, and then they have a huge dispute about it, and then their families get involved and everything gets hairy. Right. Okay.
There wouldn't be a court system. Like I say, there's a square inside of a circle, or a box inside of a circle. You would still have the systems of the judicial branch, the executive branch, but it would be diffused by having more people in it. There would be a council instead of a president.
And there'd still be like laws decided by that circle.
There would still be laws, there would still be certain things, but they would be directed more by the people than by
So any such unjust laws would be open to subjugation then and reevaluation presented to the, I guess, the council, so to speak?
We have overriding authority of the judicial and of the congressional or the legislative branches, even of the federal branch of the government. As far as like the executive branch, that would have the councils would have overriding authority, like veto, over those agencies, and then that would be based primarily on public opinion. And so, if that council itself were to be doing a bad job, the people can kick them out of the. It's not something like.
Well, that would presume you had an educated public too, that's exactly, yeah.
Has to grow horns, probably. As far as that metaphor with the circles and with a box, the circle which is counsel from the people, and a box which is inside, which is the laws and stuff inscribed, and it touches the council at its corners. The center of both of those, the center of the circle and the box, the question I have is, how is that determined? It's basically the focal point of the people, the entire total focal point of that community that is within that circle. And how is that going? How do you go about determining what that is to be for that, basically that entire community, even if some people don't quite agree with it? How do you determine that, like, where that center is?
The center would be education.
Just like
Would be like the sun of our solar system would be the education system. Everything would be revolving around that.
So basically, the center is perpetuation itself, in essence.
It would be the education system would, yes, be perpetuating
Because that's where children come from, and then that's who gets to vote.
education.
So essentially, yes, essentially it's a big circle of like, who's coming up next? How do we prepare them? It's very biological. Okay.
That's how the system came about in the first place. It's true. This is something that I didn't get from that book. This is something that I came up with and then read that book subsequently, and then I was like, wow, this is somebody with a PhD who's agreeing with me, basically. And so using the body as and I just want to read this last quote to kind of brain into the mind, like the reason why all this is kind of necessary. Our rulers will become corrupt, our people careless. A single zealot may commence persecutor, and better men be his victims. It can never be too often repeated that the time for fixing every essential right on a legal basis is while our rulers are honest and ourselves united. From the conclusion of this war, we shall be going downhill. It will not then be necessary to resort every moment to the people for support. They will be forgotten, therefore, and their rights disregarded. They will forget themselves, but in the sole faculty of making money, and will never think of uniting to effect a due respect of their rights. The shackles, therefore, which will not be knocked off at the conclusion of this war, will remain on us long, and will be made ever heavier and heavier, till our rights will revive or expire in a convulsion. And that is exactly the times we're living in right now. But to emphasize the point of uniting, that is what will save humanity, or our country, or our species. To unite in the pursuit of our rights, to sustain our rights and to establish them.
So, talking on a perspective of, when you're talking to people who do see kind of what's going on, who are not blissfully unaware, who, want to know what exactly they can do about it, what would your best advices be as far as, like, how to go about the situation, and, like, what is the most important focus? First of all, I mean, I would assume you would probably say education. Educate yourself in as many variables as possible, and then begin to kind of spread that knowledge throughout your own family circles and your own networks as much as you can, but to a certain extent, people only listen for a split second, you know what I mean? And it's difficult to get people to kind of get on the same train of thought when their worldview is still so dramatically opposed to what you are seeing, you know?
One of the things that we can do is to be that educator, but then also to be someone who's providing them a service of some kind. If you can use the information that you have, like what the attempt of the Baltimore Freethinkers is to, or just the gardening aspect of the New Moon Rising project, is to have gardening as a way to improve people's lives, and then when you slip that idea into that, you incorporate into that the idea that there is a better way to live. Then you are getting their attention. You're providing them a service. They will want to learn from you. They will actually want to hear what you have to say.
Especially if they see us living it already.
Yeah. Aside from that, I think a prime example of what a garden can do for a community is, I'm sure you're all familiar back in the early 90s with the LA riots. Well, no one really followed that story up to the point of what happened to revitalize that area. What it was actually a garden.
Yeah.
They got people together, I think a couple celebrities got involved, and they actually took a desperate, worthless parking lot, and they made it thrive into this garden, and it rebuilt the entire community. It caused all these people who would not normally be within 500 feet of each other to be working side by side.
Yes, and one of the other things is, imagine if there were an attempt to provide other services, not just the gardening thing, but also even just medical assistance or things like that, healing people in certain ways. There's a lot of things that could be provided that don't take very much time and effort to learn that can also be applied. But basically, as long as you can provide services, and the gardening is it's the easiest, really, in terms of for a human being to grasp it, the easiest thing possible to provide as a service. I mean, medical care is a lot more difficult, and it's a lot harder to get a business started in terms of that. For instance, the Black Panthers. The Black Panthers actually started their own medical services, like hospitals and food services, and the reason for saying so is that, hey, the government's not going to do it for us. So, I mean, these are all things. This is all stuff that has happened in the past. It just has to be reapplied. You just have to be that passionate about it to organize and to actually get into motion our ways of thinking.
I think a huge part of that right now is that there's this ongoing kind of, I don't want to say battle, but it is kind of a battle of ideas going on between all of these different movements that are happening. Like, what kind of systems would better sustain the planet as a whole, and what kind of, what are the root causes of all of the problems we see today? And then you have those who are completely unaware of what's going on, really. I mean, but who is to say that any one person has a whole complete understanding of what exactly is happening? I mean, we have bits and pieces, but nobody has the whole picture because it's so complicated. I mean, but it's at the point where it's becoming increasingly obvious, where it's hard to deny the globalization into kind of a one world system, where you were saying neo-feudalism. But I think one of the most important things now is that these ideas, right now is the time where these ideas are really building momentum, and people will sit there and say, oh, well, you're just arguing about nonsense on the internet and stuff like that. I mean, but the thing of it is, that actually does have an implication, because if you get your point across, and the internet is a prime form for kind of really getting these ideas out and winning over the ideas, and not so much just winning them, but to presenting them.
It has replaced the marketplace.
Right.
In terms of being able to discuss ideas with many people at once, it is its own community. And that's a part of what I was saying, is that we need to seek community organize into communities or integrate our ideas into the community. And that's why it's so important to even get involved in the government apparatus as well. It's important to run for an office. If somebody like me or you got into an office politically, imagine how much we could do to help that situation. Imagine how much we could do to affect our ideas and goals into reality when we have that position in government. So that is another thing that is important as well. Like, you can run for office. Any one of us can run for office.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the way I understand it, the social contract of the state basically it institutes that we either love it, leave it, or persuade it to change. And those are kind of like, you know, a combination of any of those three options. But at this point, just leaving it, the problem still persists. And in one sense, if you stop fueling the corporate beast that's kind of empowering the system, that is, you know, inevitably a good thing at some extent, but you still, I mean, there's still an aspect of that whole system still exists, and there needs to be a forefront of ideas kind of going out there to kind of disseminate the whole thing as being a giant scam is essentially what it is. It's a Ponzi scheme. It's a Ponzi scheme. And I mean, if you just recognize that and leave it, that's one thing. But if you recognize it, leave it, and also persuade it to change, that's a whole other ballgame, you know? And I think that's where it really is at this point.
It's difficult to leave it and persuade it to change.
It is.
I think that the best way that we have, the best way to solve that problem is not to leave it. And it is to try to convince it to change, but it's also to convince us to change.
Right.
It's not just the system that's the problem. It's the people that are propping it up. It's essentially what it is. It's like a table whereon all of the fat cats are eating their, you know, banquet, and we are the legs of that table. We are propping up that table, and as soon as we stand up, the whole table falls over, and their entire sham is revealed. And it does. I would love to see one day. I don't mean in the future. I'm just saying in terms of like arrange an event, promote an idea of having just one day where nobody buys a thing. Nobody buys anything. Nobody goes anywhere in their car. They just read a book for a day.
The whole system would implode.
Who does anything for a day?
The whole thing would implode.
Well, that's the point, is that if...
Used to be called Sunday.
Oh, right. Sunday. Yeah. Unfortunately, you know, the religions haven't helped any either, which is what they're supposed. That's what religion, that's what Christianity is supposed to do. It's supposed to be the moral authority that causes people to change or persuade the systems to be more in alignment with what their ideas are. But it doesn't work. It hasn't happened. One of the best things that we could do is go to the churches and bring these kinds of ideas to them, because more than likely than not, they will agree. It's just that they're so far behind ideologically and spiritually, really, that they don't even have, most places like that don't even have a sense of love thy neighbor. Only when they're there in the church. Outside of there, you know, it's another story. But it's something that if that was an actual legitimate guiding light, we wouldn't have these situations that we have today. We wouldn't have the problems of immorality that we have today if it worked. More people are corrupted by the religions than are helped by them, unfortunately. More people, because it's secondhand knowledge. How valid or how important or valuable is it to someone that's just been given it? They didn't learn it themselves. They've been told that this is true. So how much are they going to put into that? If that's how it came into being to them, is that if they were just told. It's like if you tell a child not to eat candy.
Right. You would have to tell them why. At least the ones that want to think just a little bit.
yeah, the people that want to think a little bit, you tell them why you do something, why you don't do something, instead of just telling them the commandment. And, you'll probably get most thinking people to adhere to it, because it's going to like, well, that makes sense. I wouldn't want to hurt myself, so I guess I will follow that. You're still going to get some people that are going to do it anyway, because they want to see really how that all works out specifically or in their own situation in lives. But indoctrination, don't do this or do this without a reason behind it is not something that works real well, because then people don't know why. And so they just don't even remember why the lesson's there. Reasoning behind something is actually very important as to what people will choose later and how they'll envision their future.
I was just going to say that in regards to learning something and having knowledge about something, it's one thing to just kind of be told something and be told this is how it is, shut up. And it's another thing to figure it out yourself and have that epiphanizing aha moment, because that's what you're really looking for, is to derive meaning out of what you're learning. If you're just regurgitating information, then what the hell are you doing? You know what I mean? That you're deriving meaning is what really is practical, because then you can utilize that energy that you get from like having that aha epiphany, as opposed to just kind of like our school system is teaching us just to regurgitate information on command. Shut up, you need to know this because you'll survive in the economy and you'll thrive in it, and then you get your retirement and then you die. It's like, come on.
This is also part of the reason why religion is failing, is because the education system is so indoctrinating that it replaces what we know from religion and actually completely causes you to deny that there is even a moral authority or a moral or morality in general. Unfortunately, that's kind of
I think any system or any design that suppresses the exploratory nature of the human mind and the curiosity of humanity in general is really just cutting us off at the knees in general.
right. Well, what you're talking about is the creation of the coffin, the creation of the box, the creation of the human nature, the artificial, the fabricated human nature. That's what education is there to instill, is to create the foundations of the coffin, and then when you get into the world, that nails it in. That's what
But those foundations are only set up to be beneficial to the system we exist in. Those foundations are not set up to be beneficial to the talents that we may have to further that civilization.
Right. And so that's why we're regressing. That's why we've gone through that stage where basically we're the Roman Empire and it's collapsing.
Sound like a journey.
I guess if there aren't any more questions. You have like 3 guys and 1 girl over there. I think that is kind of funny that there's.
I don't know.
It's like a high school auditorium.
Middle school teens.
Okay. I guess if that's it, then.
There's 4.
Thank you, audience.
Thank you, audience participation.